I made a video about this lens almost 2 years ago, introducing and testing the lens with good results in terms of sharpness. Back then, I was a little disappointed when I ordered the lens, as I got the AIS version and not the AF version. It clearly was a mistake on my side, but I did not want to go through the hassle of returning the lens to Japan, so I decided to keep it. Since then, I've grown fond of manual focus, as I shoot very little that moves, and the throw on this lens is probably one of the sweetest I have. And even though the throw is very short, it's only a tad more than a quarter of a full turn, I find it is super easy to work with. The same applies to the zoom ring, no trumpet here, a real ring to turn for zooming in and out. Wonderful. In this video I want to cover a few things missing in the first video, first and foremost sample pictures, but also bokeh, sunstars and some technical aspects of this lens. You can find the sample pictures in the Flickr album I created for the purpose, the link is in the description. Other than the lack of autofocus, my AIS version lacks the CPU contacts, and for a zoom lens with variable aperture, your camera has no way of knowing what aperture and focal length you're shooting at. So the EXIF information will be missing at best. So both for the completeness of EXIF information and for your own comfort when focusing, I recommend you get the autofocus version unless you absolutely love the manual focus, in which case the AIS version gives you a wide and super sweet focus ring, whereas the AF version with the same has a slim plastic ring and a much less premium feel to it. And mind you that if you have a 3000 or 5000 series Nikon camera body, then there is no built-in autofocus motor anyway. Another thing to notice is that this lens is not very fast, giving 3.5 wide and 4.5 long. This lens requires some light if you want to stay above 100 of a second in order to avoid camera shake. For shooting landscape or nature, this has never been an issue for me. The zoom range may disappoint some. I find that wide it is surprisingly wide even compared to my 24mm prime, but in the long end you may miss the additional reach of say the 28-105 that I recently reviewed. Mind you that this lens is heavy, a tad more than 500 grams, metal and glass, made in Japan, as we know and love it. Slap it onto a D700 and the entire package is 1.5 kilo, not exactly lightweight. I found good copies of this lens on eBay down to €40, but probably be wise to pay a bit more and get a good copy that's not too beaten up. And mind you that there may be taxes and shipping costs added to the price of your lens, subject to where you live. But still, counting all inclusive, this is not an expensive lens and you get a lot of good glass for your money. This lens has distortion and vignetting, and to such a degree it's almost funny. You may get seasick watching some of these pictures, and architecture photographers may want to stop here. You can, however, quickly fix this in post, either handheld or more systematically. I have a video about the latter in case you are curious. You can also avoid the extremes of the zoom and stay in the middle where the distortion is controlled. Flare is not very well controlled, albeit better than many other vintage lenses, but don't expect miracles when shooting into the sun. The blades in this lens are slightly rounded in their design, but unfortunately not sufficiently to make the bokeh balls rounded. Fully open without the blades working, the bokeh looks nice, but as soon as you stop down, the roundness disappears, and it's probably only us photographer nerds that will ever notice. The background blur, in my opinion, looks nice in a flower shot like this, so maybe it's less of an issue actually. I'm not entirely a fan of the sunstars this lens produces. Some of the spikes in the sunstars are split in two, and I think this has to do with the slightly rounded design of the blades. They are not bad though, but not as good as what I've seen from other vintage lenses with more straight blades. This lens has a macro mode which brings the minimal focus distance from 80 centimeters down to around 25, and as this is measured from the sensor to the subject, in real life that means you can have the front of the glass only a few centimeters from the subject. For shooting flowers where you want to fill the frame as much as possible to avoid cropping, I find this feature super useful. I know that real macro photographers call the macro mode for a gimmick, but for me it means that I can leave my extension tubes at home, and therefore I love this little feature. So I can call it, let's say, reduce the minimum focus distance mode, or RTMFD mode, and then the macro shooters will leave me alone, I hope. In my opinion, all the technical issues I have reported above, they melt away when you start working with the lens. Color rendition is as we know it with Nikon, it's absolutely amazing, and the contrast in this lens is nothing less than astonishing. The focal range is relative to the extreme and more modern zooms, of course very limited, but when you get used to it you will find that it is a versatile little lens. I hope these pictures speak for themselves. Mind you that if you go see the pictures in the Flickr album, the EXIF information is off due to the lack of CPU contacts, as I mentioned. So if you consider the price starting at €40, the versatility of the zoom range that can do both landscape, portrait and street, the fact that the color rendition and contrast is superb, that it's built like a tank and available with autofocus, then I simply don't understand why not more photographers praise this lens and its astonishing value for money. It comes with my highest recommendation. Basically, if you're unlike me, remember to order the autofocus version. That's it from me. Hope you found this useful. Thank you for watching. As always, happy shooting. Take care. Bye-bye.